Oh, there's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Shun the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. Here I am with another episode of Another Words, an occasional series where I talk about words and phrases and stuff that I encountered in my reading. And as I like to remind you occasionally, I'm not a professional etymologist or an expert in these matters, but I certainly like doing the deep dives on whatever's available to me online, and there's lots of great etymological resources available for free online, and I have a good time putting stuff together and definitely make mistakes, so check out the comment section where some of the real scholarship and additions and further thoughts, because I don't pretend to have a corner on the etymological market. I have a playlist of all of these because the YouTube search engine, which used to be pretty good, sucks lately, so they're all there in that playlist if you want to watch more of these. And without further ado, I've got about, I think, a half dozen words to tell you about tonight. The first couple are from the fabulous novel by the Irish writer Anne Enright and her novel The Green Road, which I read during the Irish Readathon this year and absolutely loved it. And the first one from there is Trustafarian. The quote is, "Jessie's arch rival Mandy was also in the mix with her glossy Trustafarian hair." So I found out, as you may have already known, that trustafarian is a fairly new and informal noun, which is a blend of trust, fund, and Rastafarian. So that's maybe all you need to know to get the meaning. It's a wealthy young person who adopts an alternative lifestyle incorporating elements from non-Western cultures, Rastafarianism. So the fashion sensibilities of a hippie or any other kind of counter-cultural trend, Maoism, punk rock, you name it, and combining that with kind of a hedonistic life of not holding down a job and having an unlimited amount of funds from their family, from a trust fund. Trustafarian. And there are some fun memes about that I will put up here now. So it sounds like an enviable lifestyle. The other one from the Anne Enright novel is ramshackle, which of course I was very familiar with the word and knew what it meant, but often I encounter words where it's not like I don't know what it means, but why does it mean that and what's the etymology? And this is an example of that. So, as we all know, ramshackle means something that's usually a house that's not well made or in good condition, likely to collapse, loosely joined. And the etymology here is fascinating. So it actually came into English, or it was kind of invented or whatever, in 1809. But back to the 1670s, the earlier version was ranshackled as a adjective. A ranshackled house rather than a ramshackle house. And that was an alteration of a verb, ransackle, which goes back to the word that we still use in crime novels, or maybe of a certain vintage or whatever, ransack. Typically, the adjective ramshackle was applied to carriages and houses. In 1820, a ramshackle, as a noun or as an adjective, it described a person or an action that was considered to be erratic, not erotic, erratic, unstable, or disordered. And then that quickly moved away from people and actions to buildings and carriages, okay? And it did also become a noun. A ramshackle was a ramshackle building or a ramshackle carriage. You could just use it as a noun. So the fascinating thing that I learned is that ransack, which in more modern, I don't think it's a word. When was the last time you used the verb ransack? But we use it usually to apply to a thief searching through our house for the jewels. Being very messy and chaotic about it, and upturning the drawers, emptying out the drawers on the floor, and that's to ransack. But originally, the nuance was on the other end, that when you ransacked somebody's house, it was because you thought they stole something from you, and you push your way in, or you enter their abode, and you turn everything inside out in their house to find your stolen property. That was the original connotation of ransack. So that's fascinating. That goes back to Scandinavian, Old Norse, Proto-Germanic, Gothic. The Old English root meant a plank or a ceiling, and that is connected to barn. Plus sacca, so ran, but it was spelled R-A-E-G-N, the plank, and there's an etymological link to the word barn, and sacca, so ransacka, and sacca goes back to search or seek. I didn't go down the barn or the seek rabbit holes, but that's fascinating. The idea of this, the connection between ramshackle and ransack, is that once you've ransacked somebody's house, the house becomes chaotic, and if you are, really, really physically violent, you could destabilize the structure of the house or the carriage, and it might collapse. So that's a cartoonish bridge, but that's the idea. And the last thing I want to say about this one is that in the late 18th century, there was a kind of an arbitrary formation of a bunch of colloquialisms, many of which we still use today, that had a prefix, ram or rum, which had the idea of a boisterousness, an intensity, a carelessness, and they think that exerted some influence on the development of the adjective ramshackle. But the other one is that we use today is rambunctious, one of my very most favorite words, which it means arrogantly boisterous, careless of the comfort of others. And they think it actually came from an earlier one that we don't use anymore, but I think we should resuscitate. Rumbustious, same meaning. There was also rumbustical, rambumptious, ramgumptious, rambuskious, rumstrugenous or rumstrugenous, I don't know how to pronounce it. Yeah, so all of those, they all kind of entered English, colloquial English around the same time, and there's the idea of rum and ramp. So let's talk a little bit about ramp. So the ram, they think, is connected to ramp, and the specific meaning of ramp, meaning to climb or to stand on your hind legs like a lion or wolf would. So to behave menacingly. Wow. And other words we get are rampage, rampant, rapscallion, romp. Oh yeah, this is fantastic. This is a particularly rumbustious episode of In Other Words, I hope. The next one is bedlamitical, and we're going to dispense with the adjective because it probably hasn't been used since Henry James included it in this short story, and focus on the noun, bedlam. The anthology is The Golden Age of British Short Stories, 1890 to 1914, edited by Philip Hencher, and the Henry James short story is The Figure in the Carpet. And I don't like Henry James, and it seems to me that I didn't mind this story as much as I have loathed most of what I've read by him, but I have to say that 2 or 3 months later, I can't remember anything about it, so that says a lot, but I did get this word from it, bedlamitical. He was like nothing, I told him, but the maniacs who embrace some bedlamitical theory of the cryptic character of Shakespeare. Well, that brings the story a little bit back. But anyway, let's talk about bedlam. Because I didn't know, maybe you did, it's a colloquial mispronunciation of Bethlehem. Bedlam, and it goes back to the mental hospital in London. The Hospital of St. Mary of Bethlehem in London, founded in the year 1247, turned into a quote-unquote lunatic hospital in 1402, and has been called Bedlam rather than Bethlehem since forever and ever. And apparently the English didn't know how to pronounce Bethlehem, so they mangled it down to Bedlam, which became Bedlam. In modern parlance, Bedlam is a violent or confusing situation. And it's never been as popular as it was, that meaning and the usage of the word Bedlam in English, as it was in the 17th century. And that's when I stopped using it. Next, one expression from this collection of short stories by Alice Munro, Runaway. It was the story Powers, and the phrase is, take a scunner. Let's see if we can find that. I don't remember the details, but the sentence is, he's taken a scunner against rugs, which is actually a strange way to use this expression, but the person they're speaking about has become mentally unstable. Maybe he needs to go to Bedlam. This is a Scottish expression, and the verb in Scottish is scunner, scunnered, which means to feel disgust or strong dislike for something. So this man took a strong dislike to, what did I say, rugs? Is that right? Yep. An irrational dislike. Did I say that? The dislike is irrational. So that makes sense. If you're going to take a dislike to rugs, suddenly, that sounds irrational to me. It goes back to a Middle English verb, sconnerin, to feel sick or disgusted. They think it might have been a variation. They used a highfalutin linguistic word that I'd never encountered, frequentative, which is a noun, a grammatical term to mean the kind of word that shows that something is happening a lot. So they believe that it might be a frequentative of shun. So if you shun a lot, that is scunnering, or the Middle English sconnerin. And they say that there aren't any modern examples of frequentatives, but there are in other languages. A form of a word that shows that whatever the action is, or whatever the thing is, it happens a lot. So shun plus er, shunner, scunner. But that has not been proven. Then I will link to, rather than spending a lot of time trying to summarize this, I'm just going to put a link. The Oxford University Press has an etymologist blog, and there is an entry there about the possibility that scunner and scoundrel are etymologically linked. And the author of this blog entry goes through all the history of various positions that etymologists over the centuries have taken, and the rather heated debates that have occurred. And I didn't think that ultimately there was enough there in a conclusion for me to try to explain it, but I will put a link in the show notes. Alongside Alice Munro, the other absolutely amazing collection of short stories I've read already in 2021 is Daddy by Emma Cline. And in her story, Mac the Knife, she refers to the Ship of Theseus. And I had never, in all my days, encountered it, so I looked it up. Here is the sentence. Whatever fellow this is, he used to make jokes about the Ship of Theseus, back when he cared more about people thinking he was smart. And I was not smart enough to know what that meant. So, here's what it means. If you didn't know, this is a thought experiment. No wonder I didn't know about it. That goes back to ancient times, first discussed by Heraclitus and Plato, but later by Plutarch. And so the idea of this, and let me start with the actual Ship of Theseus. So in ancient myth, which is not my strong suit or something that I'm very interested in, the hero Theseus sails a famous ship into a great battle, and then afterwards it was put into a museum. As the years went by, the wooden parts of the ship on display in the museum started to rot, and so they were gradually, whenever a certain piece of the ship would rot, they would replace it with a new part, and by the end, after 100 years or so, every part of the original Ship of Theseus had been replaced. So the thought experiment is whether an object that has had all of its components replaced is fundamentally the same object. And this smacks of philosophy, so I could care less about the thought experiment, but it's interesting to think about it, even for people that loathe philosophy, like I do. So that is The Ship of Theseus. And the last from a debut novel from Ireland that I read and absolutely loved earlier this year, Big Girl, Small Town by Michelle Gallen. And this is just saturated with fabulous Irish slang and Irish colloquialisms, and it's just incredible. I loved the novel so much. And I'm only going to talk about one here, but stay tuned. I have a whole bunch more, like, probably 7 more episodes of In Other Words to talk about all the vocabulary that is in this fabulous debut novel. Stocious. It's one of the protagonist, Magella's, favorite words because she loves drinking, and Stocious means drunk. So I saved this one till the end. I'm not Stocious, but I'm on the road to Stocious. The interesting thing that I found in my research is that it's actually kind of more of a Scottish word. I'll put a link in the show notes to an article that I found in the Scotsman that told me that it's the most elegant word in Scottish for drunk. It's a classier version of words like steaming or guttered. As the writer of this Scottish newspaper article says, it does roll trippingly off the tongue, even if you are Stocious. Stocious. And that it's actually kind of a cross-pollination between Scots and Irish. And in fact, this article says, and I couldn't find anything independently to verify it, that it has its roots in Hiberno-English, which is a term I had not encountered before, but that is the English typically spoken in Ireland. So it's an English word used in Irish and in Scottish. Typically meaning to be in a very drunken state. More drunk than, and these would be Scottish words, whether they exist in Irish slang, I don't know, but it's above gubbed, but one step below blootered. That's fantastic. But it's the adjective of choice when the inebriated person is starting to lose their balance. So isn't that fabulous? That is all for now. Thanks for watching.